How far would you go for infinite knowledge? Not just intelligence or talent, but access to everything, to every secret, every truth, every conspiracy theory, every piece of power that has ever existed. Would you sacrifice your morals, your relationship, or maybe even another person? Because in the Atlas 6, 6 people are given the same exact choice, but only 5 are meant to survive. Hello, my gorgeous viewers and readers. Welcome back, or welcome if you're new. I hope your weekend was filled with overpriced airport coffee, walking far too much in a foreign city, and getting completely lost in a book that you cannot just put down. And I wanted to apologize for the delay in this video. And because if you cannot hear from my voice, I am really sore. I was in Barcelona last weekend, and I think I partied a little bit too much, and I completely lost my voice. I feel so croaky right now. So yeah, I cannot create a video earlier and post it on YouTube because I genuinely could not speak. So this is the first time I am speaking in like 4 days. So I want to apologize for the delay, but also want to apologize for how croaky and bad I sound. I know that I shouldn't be recording right now and I should let my voice rest, but I just finished reading a book that I have seen everywhere and I need to talk to you guys about it. I have seen this book on booktube, on booktalk, bookstagram, in every single dark academia recommendation video that I have seen, and the book is The Atlas 6 by Olivie Blake. This is a book that in many ways has opened the door for a subgenre that I actually really enjoy, which is dark academia fantasy. Obviously, you have all the characteristics of dark academia, which is the power struggles, the intellect, the desire for knowledge, but also the desire to be more knowledgeable than everyone else, but also introducing some characteristics of fantasy. In this case specifically, we bring a magic system. So that is why this book is considered part of the dark academia fantasy subgenre. And honestly, when I read the synopsis of this book, I was so excited, right? Because it had everything I wanted. We had the intellect, we had the intellectual competition, but also the intellectual validation and all this desire for knowledge, but also it had this side of magic and fantasy that I also really enjoy. So I had such expectations and the plot sounded amazing. And honestly, I so wish I loved this book, but I unfortunately didn't. Because as much as I loved the idea, actually the execution wasn't as great as I expected. Because even though this book had great promises, or gave me great promises, it had obviously an incredible concept, but also a really great potential plot and incredible aesthetics. Actually, the delivery wasn't what was promised. So today I want to talk about why I thought this book had great potential, but actually the execution wasn't what I expected. I will talk about the plot, I will talk about the characters, but also I will talk about how this magic system is set up as well. The story follows 6 incredibly talented individuals who each possess a very unique magical ability. They are all recruited by a mysterious figure called Atlas Blakely in order to join a very secret society called the Alexandrian Society. And this society is not just any random group composed by powerful individuals. It is actually the guardian of all lost knowledge, because in this world, actually, the Library of Alexandria wasn't destroyed, it was just hidden, and the Alexandrian Society is the guardian of this library. And every 10 years, this society chooses 6 individuals to safeguard this knowledge, to safeguard the Library of Alexandria. They are promised access to the library, access to all this knowledge, and access to develop their own magical abilities. But there is only one condition, and that even though there are 6 that enter into this library, into this society, only 5 must remain. And here is where we are introduced to the six individuals. Starting with the first two, we have Livy Rose and Nico de Verona, who are two rival physicists who can bend reality. They have slightly different powers, and the more you get into the book, the more you realize how different their powers are. But then we have Barista Kamali, who is a telepath. She can actually read minds, but also can manipulate them at her will. Then we have Callum Nova, who is an empath. So he can understand and read other people's feelings, but then manipulate them in very unsettling ways. Then we have Tristan Kane, who can see through magic and illusions. So, for example, he doesn't have any active powers, but he can see that people are using magic or they are using illusions. And then lastly, we have Raina Mori, who is a naturalist who can manipulate life and who can grow plants, but also manipulate any sort of magic. As they enter the society, they are given a set of tasks, studies, and experiments in order to develop themselves, but most importantly, to test their limits, to test their intelligence, their power, but also their loyalty. The more we see in the book, or the more we go further into the book, the more we see how everyone mistrusts each other, right? They always believe that people are plotting behind their back, but also we see how far people will go in order to get all this knowledge, in order for them to get access to the Alexandrian society. Because in a space where everyone is exceptional, being good is not enough. You have to be ruthless. And as alliances and tensions arise, we see that the real danger is not the Alexandrian society, but each other. Let's start with what this book actually does great, because there are things that I think work incredibly well in this book, right? For example, the concept of the Library of Alexandria not actually being destroyed, but just hidden to the public, and that there is a secret society that is actually safeguarding this lost knowledge, I think it's fucking genius. It just sounds incredible. And the idea that there is hidden knowledge that only a few exclusive people have access to is like catnip for dark academia lovers like me. And also the fact that magic or the magic system feels intellectual is genius. So it's incredible, because as much as I love magic systems, right, the fact that magic here feels like biology, physics, time, metaphysics, but also neuropsychology feels great. Is one of the things that feels so unique about this book, and is actually one of the things that attracted me to read this book in the first place. Like, for example, each character's magic reflects the way they think, the way they interact, but also the way they are, right? So, for example, Nico de Verona and Libby Rhodes have similar magic, but they are different people. They are different characters because of the way they use the magic, but also the powers that they have within this magic itself, right? Because they are both physicists, but they both have different different ways to practice their magic, but also different powers in their own physics. So I think that was something that I really enjoyed. But here is the caveat that I have with this point, and is that we are told, or we are shown, how magic interacts with the world, or how these magicians or medallions interact with each other, but we are not shown why magic exists in the first place. Like, there's no real foundation and no real explanation. It seems as in this world, magic just is, right? And for these characters who are so obsessed with knowledge, who actually go into this Alexandrian society with no knowledge of the society, of what is happening around them, they just accept and decide to go into this into this fellowship because they had the ability to learn and to get all this knowledge and develop their abilities. I just don't understand why none of the characters are actually interested into learning what this magic is, or how this magic was born in the first place, right? And for these characters who are so obsessed with understanding and bending the universe, I don't understand how none of them are actually interested in the one thing that makes the universe function. Now, getting into the plot, the premise of this book is extremely strong, right? So there are six characters that enter into the society, and only five stay and one has to leave, right? This should create immediate tension, but also extreme unease and constantly having the feeling that you have to look behind your back because someone is like you can't trust anyone, right? But for the vast majority of the book, this feels incredibly stagnant, meaning that the characters just do their lessons, study, interact with each other in some sort of way, but then nothing really happens. No one actually actively mistrusts each other or like actively tries to play into this chess match or to try to kick people out, right? There are some intents of trying to kick people out, but nothing really happens. And this is one thing that I don't understand. Like, if I was there, I would not even trust my best friend, right? Because, for example, Livy and Nico, they trust each other immediately. Obviously, I understand that they know each other already, but like knowing how much they dislike each other, I would not trust Nico if I was Livy, right? I don't understand how they trust each other immediately. What frustrated me the most about the plot is the fact that some characters feel strangely absent. So, if I look into all the characters, some of the characters feel active characters and others feel like secondary or inactive characters, right? So I see Libby and Nico as active characters. We see them everywhere, right? They are constantly working and constantly studying and doing all these experiments. And then there are characters that only interact with Nico or Libby or other characters, right? We don't really see them, or we don't see them as much as we should, but we just see them when they interact with the main characters or with the active characters, right? For example, Callum. We did not see a single thing about Callum during the book. We only saw when he was interacting with other people. Or Reina, for example, we see one scene from her or two scenes from her, but in the vast majority of the scenes where she appears, she is interacting with other characters as an inactive character. Same thing with Parisa. Well, I think Parisa is a little bit different. I think she is more active, but yeah, all the characters or the vast majority of the characters act as inactive characters or secondary characters rather than characters that are as important as Libby and Nico, for example. It almost feels as if the characters are activated when the plot needs it, rather than being active individuals who exist in the vacuum, right? And then when we get to the final part of the book, everything happens all at once, right? We have like the first 100 pages are like setting up the mood, and then nothing seems to happen, or like little things seem to happen. And then in the last 60 pages, everything happens all at once, right? And it's like, to me, this feels as if the author was trying to pick up the pace in order to sell the second book, or in order to create the hype for the second book, right? Because if nothing happens in the middle, but then everything happens at the end and you leave everything up the open, what you're trying to do here is trying to hype me up to read the second book to see what happens. Now, getting into the characters, here is where I struggle the most with this book. Because if we read this book, this is a character driven story, right? We find the plot and we read the story and what happens within the story through the characters' perspectives. And in some way, like in no way I could connect and relate to the characters whatsoever. For example, Tristan Kane, the character, he pissed me off so much because he is this character, he's presented as this character who has a mask of indifference and apathy, right? He has a wall in front of himself and in front of everyone, so he's just very hermetic, right? He doesn't let people in. But the more we get to meet him, we realize that he actually is deeply insecure. He is emotionally unstable, but also emotionally constipated, but also he has this deep need to be understood and to be loved, right? Because of all the background that he has. So instead of actually exploring this need for vulnerability and this need to be loved and understood, we just keep seeing the same actions over and over again being repeated, right? We see these like this game of ropes of him trying to trust someone, but then actually bringing, like, reeling back and just putting again the mask of indifference and apathy. Another character I did not understand at all is Callum, because he has what I would say, in my personal opinion, one of the coolest powers or abilities that we see in the book. He is an empath. He can understand and see people's emotions and then manipulate them in his own benefit. And even though we see little snippets of how actually Callum does feel emotions and feels the emotions very intensely, all I see in his actions and all I see in the book is him trying to be villainous and just becoming a sociopath. He acts like a psychopath, but he has no interest. He has no drive whatsoever. I did not understand why he wanted to be in the Alexandrian society in the first place, when he has one of what I would say is one of the most powerful abilities that all the 6 characters have. I just do not understand it. And don't even get me started with Parisa. She is such a waste of character. She had so much potential. There was so much that the author could have done with her powers and with her abilities, and she just wasted all her potential. Because, like, someone with this level of power, meaning that they can read minds but also they can manipulate these thoughts and these minds, she should be like one of these characters that have extreme, immense, like, political, psychological and strategic power. Someone like Olivie Blake, for example, that is how I would see Parisa, but instead she acts and she behaves like a glorified stripper or like a glorified sugar baby. Like, instead of being someone with such a level of power, she is actually often reduced to her sexuality, her attraction, and her understanding that she is an attractive person and that she can use her body for her own benefit. That is such a waste of potential. She is a waste of powers, abilities, and character. And the only characters that I actually liked were Atlas Blakely and Dalton, especially Dalton, because these 2 characters are the only characters that feel like they exist outside the vacuum that is the group, right? Obviously, I understand that this is about the Atlas 6 and we should see how people or how these 6 characters interact, but both Atlas and Dalton felt as if they were actually interacting and they were characters by themselves. And also their abilities sound kind of cool, but these 2 characters were the only characters that actually interacted as active individuals or as active characters, rather than just existing in a vacuum where everyone is related to each other and they only interact when they meet the other characters for the plot. At the end of the day, this book feels like an idea that never fully developed, because what is truly interesting about this book, which is the moral dilemma, the strategy, the sacrifice, but also the mistrust and paranoia, never fully come into play, or it comes into play just right before the end of the book, right? So to me, this book feels as if we are building towards something that never truly happens. And this is why I find the Atlas 6 so frustrating, because I really wanted to love the book. I love the concept. I thought the idea was great. Also, the aesthetics were impeccable. The fact that we mixed dark academia with fantasy is just a dream. That is just my jam. But actually, the more I read the story, the more I realized that the story wasn't really going anywhere. And this is the thing, that, like, sometimes we fall in love with a good concept or with a good idea or the potential of a book, but actually sometimes the potential is just that, the potential, and actually the idea doesn't really pan out as we expected. And I think this is exactly what happened in the Atlas 6, and it's the fact that the idea wasn't just good enough, or the idea was good but the execution wasn't what was expected or wasn't what the idea actually needed. That's all for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have read the book, I would love to know your opinion about it, because I've heard great things and I've heard bad things. So I would love to know what you guys think of this. And if you want more content about the Atlas 6 or any of the books that I review here, please make sure that you follow me on my social media platforms. I post there every day and I post more extra content. But yeah, again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you soon. Bye.